All right, everyone, I have Kelley Nemiro here, and I'm really excited to chat with her because she has an amazing story. She's really passionate about her purpose and helping women find a sense of balance in their life and to feel better than they ever have before. She is a certified holistic health coach and a Pilates instructor, and just has so much to talk about with us today. We were just chatting right beforehand, and we're going to talk about hormones and stress and anxiety, all of these things that are affecting every person listening to this podcast right now, no matter what season of motherhood that you're in, if you're in the trying to conceive or you have teenagers, these are all things that are affecting us. So I'm super excited to dive into this conversation with you today. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I love that intro. So thank you for that. I think that like what you said really resonated in the sense of like, no matter what season of motherhood you are in, you can experience, things with your hormones or stress and anxiety related to hormones. Because I remember like just a little over a year ago, my husband and I were trying to conceive with our second, and we had some issues getting pregnant the second time. The first time it was like, okay, we're having a baby. And like the second time was a lot harder. And a lot of it came down to stress hormones and like a little bit of hormonal imbalance. And then now it's like, okay, how can I keep and maintain that balance with two kids running around? So I could not agree with you more.
Yeah, keeping and maintaining a balance. Well, first of all, I mean, what does it mean to have balanced hormones? Because I feel like I don't know the last time maybe my hormones were balanced. I think maybe before I had my oldest daughter, I had worked with a holistic doctor who I ended up finding out all sorts of things with my hormones, parasites, health issue, like food sensitivities, and just really having to do a deep dive. And shortly after that, we had our first daughter. I felt really great afterwards. And then my second pregnancy, I did not feel great. Postpartum, I feel like a lot of these issues are coming back up. Like literally the last few weeks, I told my husband, I'm like, I'm waiting for my period to come back because that will make sense to me why I'm feeling crazy, but it's not coming back. And so I'm like, wait, like I'm like, I have to be getting my period. I feel like I'm PMSing and I haven't felt this way in a really long time. I feel like postpartum this time around, my hormones are not in check. We want to start trying to conceive again in like 6 months. So I'm like, that means right now I need to start getting things in check because yes. I don't feel like myself. And so I'm like, what does that even mean that like my hormones aren't balanced or could be off?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. And I think that so many women these days are told that it is quote unquote normal to feel the way that they're feeling, whether that's weight gain or irritability or like you said, like bad PMS symptoms, like that's normal. And we should just all go along with that. But the truth of the matter is that it's not normal to feel uncomfortable in your body. Yes. Is it like to have, a little bit of bloating before you're about to start your period, or maybe you're a little more tired because you have more progesterone in your system, then yes. But is it normal to feel like you're crazy or like you're gonna like fly off the handle at your husband or all of those different things? No, it's not normal. And I think we're taught for so long to think that it is. And so we just go along with it. And I think that what a lot of people also don't know is that hormones really dictate how you feel in your body. So from your weight, your mood, your energy, your appetite, like a million different things, your hormones are informing how you are feeling at any given time. And so we, with our lifestyle choices, can really impact how those hormones are balanced. And a lot of times things like giving birth, like if you just had a baby, like I did, like that can throw them off, right? Of course, your hormones are going to plummet and then they have to come back into balance. You have to find your cycle again. And like I said, with lifestyle choices, like what we're putting in our mouth and how stressed we are and all those different things, we can start to control that to some degree, but we have to know what's going on first before we start to like try to throw darts blindfolded. And so we can do that through testing, which is like my favorite way, whether I'm working with a client or like a family member is asking me, like, I just feel off, or I haven't gotten my period yet. Like, okay, let's look into it. Like, let's see, are you like, have you not ovulated in a long time? Do you have this buildup of estrogen, but no progesterone? What's going on in your body, so that we can do the right things for you, so that you do get your period back, so you guys can try to have another baby again, or whatever the case may be, whatever that individual is trying to work, who is trying to work on something, can work on it.
Yeah. After my first, I got my cycle back at 12 weeks, and I actually really liked it because I felt like I've just learning a lot about my body. I'm like, that's an indicator of my health. So when I'm getting my
Yes.
cycle every like 28 to 30 days, and it's kind of telling me like, if I am crampy, if I am PMSy, if I am having different symptoms, that something else is off. And so I kind of almost welcomed it. I felt like a sense of normalcy had returned.
Yes.
And then this time I'm 6 months postpartum and it hasn't come back yet. And so I'm like, I'm feeling like I don't know what's going on with my body. Like right. I'm like breastfeeding.
Are you still breastfeeding?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know, I'm feeling a little crazy right now.
Yeah. And that elevated prolactin level, obviously, as you know, can suppress ovulation. So that could be the reason you're not having a cycle, but there could be other things that play too. Now you have 2 kids rather than just one. And so your stress levels could be higher. I know for me, same thing with my second, he's 4.5 months now, and it took longer for my cycle to return to normalcy than it did with my first. Just like it was harder to get pregnant, because things change as we age too. And we have to keep that in as one of those factors, along with lifestyle and diet and everything else, as one of the things that is evolving and can change our hormones as we go along. But like I said, like when you feel like you don't know, the best thing to do is to test. So like, I'm sure a lot of, your listeners out there might be having the same questions as you. So if I were you, I would go and get your cortisol levels tested, test your stress hormones, test your estrogen to progesterone ratio, see what that looks like, see what your FSH looks like, and then kind of go from there with whatever information that gives you.
Yeah. So let's say we do go do these tests.
Yeah.
I don't know how to interpret them. So is there like certain people I like haven't been to a normal doctor in I don't know how long. Now it's like, I just go see my midwife or my chiropractor. I don't know.
Yeah.
I worked with that functional medicine doctor a while ago, but I don't have one here, that I work with. And, so I don't know, like when people are like, who's your general practitioner? I'm like, I don't have one. Yeah. So like, where would I go? Like, can I order these labs? Does somebody order them for me? And then what would I even know what I'm looking at?
That is a great question. So you obviously have to have somebody who can order these labs for you. And so if you don't have a general practitioner, finding a health coach, like I do this for my clients. So I'll order the labs and interpret them for them. Or you could do like an OB, that's someone who could order the estrogen to progesterone. Sometimes they're a little bit hesitant because how, coming from the world you're in, how OBs are like, oh, take some birth control. That'll help your symptoms. Most of them, most Western doctors. So finding either like a functional doctor, like you were talking about, a holistic health coach, somebody who's going to look at it from a very holistic standpoint, rather than somebody who is going to say, oh, I don't want to run these tests, or your symptoms don't really mean anything. I actually had one of my really good friends' moms reach out like a couple of days ago, and she's like, can you order my labs for me? Because I went to a doctor and I told her my symptoms, and she just told me, okay, take testosterone and estrogen, but she didn't even do blood work. And she's like, I don't trust that. I'm like, you shouldn't. You don't know what's going on in your body. There's no reason for you to take hormones when you don't know what's going on.
Right. Exactly. And that's like why I'm glad that you brought that up, just kind of finding the right person to go to, because it's more than just like prescribing something. Not to say that like certain prescriptions don't work for certain people for certain things, but I did have some like health issues in my 20s, and I was offered, even I think maybe when I was 30, right before I got married, was told to get on birth control because I was having really crazy cycles and different things going on. And I told the OB that I was at, he's like, I'd really recommend getting on birth control. Like they did a transvaginal ultrasound, they did like other things. He found like a tiny pull up in my cervix, but he's like, I don't know what else it could be. You should probably get on birth control. And I just said, I'm like, I don't feel comfortable getting on that. I feel like my body's telling me something. And he's like, well, I don't know how to help you then. That's exactly what he said. And I'm like, okay, well then obviously you aren't the person I should be going to for this reason.
1000%. And I just want to say, like, when you don't know, you don't know, but like such a beautiful thing that you had the intuition to be like, this isn't right for me, because I can say 100% that in my early 20s, when I was going through all my health stuff, like I didn't have that intuition. So I was on birth control for 11 years when I wasn't like naturally getting a period on my own. So like every doctor was just like, oh, this will give you a period. But like, as we all know, birth control isn't a real period. That's just
right.
Synthetic hormones. And then I would go in for anxiety and they're like, just take this anti-anxiety medicine, rather than like actually having me learn the coping strategies and mechanisms to deal with the anxiety. Or I would go into a doctor and be like, I've gained so much weight. Like, what's the deal? And like, no one was willing to test my thyroid. And so they would just be like, oh, eat less, exercise more. And I'm like, okay, I'll do all of those things. And then it was just fuel to the fire, making every single issue I had worse instead of better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And also it doesn't leave like the nuance of everything, that like there is kind of like a certain set of like the way things should be, but we're all individuals. So
Yes.
not everything works the same for every person. And I think that that's like an important part of the conversation too. Because I was just listening to this on like podcast this morning that just kind of resonated with me, because I'm training for a half marathon right now, and I don't love running, but I'm doing it just because I needed something after my second to like kind of kick my butt, because after my first, I got pregnant really soon and I felt so weak, and just, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this half marathon. It's going to make me get out of the house every day. With my first, I was at home. I had such bad postpartum, like anxiety. I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't know how to leave the house. How do I bring my baby into the world? I just was so overwhelmed. So this time I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm getting out of the house. I'm doing something. And so it's been good. I'm excited for it to be over in a month, but I was listening to this morning because one thing that also kind of health practitioners failed to see in my mid-20s though too, I had had an eating disorder for 13 years. And so I was thinking this morning on the run, I'm like, part of that healing with my hormones actually looked, after years of dieting, restriction, like bulimia, all these things happening, part of that healing looked like me gaining a little bit of weight and then finding my healthy balance. And like, that's something that like if somebody's saying, oh, if you want to lose weight, just do this, but there's like so many deeper things to the conversation that affect our hormones, that affect different things. And I'm like, I remember when I was finding that healing and I gained weight and I felt so embarrassed of myself, like that I didn't want people to see me because I had gained weight, but I was actually doing I was mentally healthier.
Things.
Yes. Like than I ever had been. And then like eventually I found my happy place, which
your set point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was in the same exact place. I had an eating disorder for like 9 years. Or just like eating disorder that was really severe, that turned into disordered eating and then was finally ultimately healed. But for the longest time, it was like, if someone would comment on my weight, like I would feel, even a doctor, I would feel ashamed of it, while at the same time knowing that I had to ask myself that question every day of like, is what I'm doing a nourishing choice for my body, or is it a restrictive choice, whether that was with food or exercise or whatever, because there's so much confusing misinformation. And I think a lot of times we can because of diet culture, get these messages that health and weight are equivalent when they're really not. And everyone, like you said, has, as a bio individual, everyone has a different set point weight. And so what might look healthy for one person is definitely not healthy for another. And having a variety of images in your mind of what a healthy body is such a healthy thing to have. That's something that I definitely work with so many of my clients on, because I think that because of social media and just media in general, now we all have this image in our brain of like what a woman should look like this like thick, thin figure. And it's like, it doesn't leave room for everybody else. And so I think that like getting reacquainted with that is so important, while at the same time, like you said, like knowing that there are, what you're doing internally and the internal work you're doing on yourself is so much more important than someone's outside opinion, external validation, whether that's a doctor or your mom or a friend or anybody else, because no one really knows what you're going through mentally. And I did the same thing when I first started, working on my mentality around food. I actually ended up gaining weight until my body was like, okay, we're not in fight or flight anymore. We're not afraid that you're not going to that you're going to keep starving us. Like, we're safe. And so we can actually come back to like a healthy, normal weight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so much individualized care that like needs to happen. And I feel like it's true for hormones too. Like there's definitely a starting point. There's a balance that we definitely need to look for, but there's so many things that impact that. And like we said at the beginning, just the different seasons of life, no matter what you're in, your hormones are a part of that. And stress. So that's like the other factor here is like
the foundation for all of your hormones, like to be balanced is whether or not you're constantly in that state of stress.
And how do you even recognize that? Because I feel like I'm not somebody who, I mean, besides lately, I'm not somebody who's naturally stressed out. Like when I've talked to people who deal more with that, like my sister and I are polar opposites on like almost every single thing. And when she would stress about things, I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I'm not, I don't have that angst or whatever, but motherhood definitely has changed me a little bit. But I've realized that I stress my body and other things out in different ways than she does. Like she's good at not like scrolling on her phone before bed. And I'm like, I will. Yeah. So, that there's different factors in there. So like, what does that, like, how does stress, I guess, play into the hormone health?
I love this question. And I'll explain it in a couple of different ways, because I love that you brought in the like aspect of, the fact that you're on your phone at night like that, and that being a stressor on your body, because what that's doing is it's inhibiting melatonin production. And so it's allowing you to not get into a more like restful REM state of sleep more efficiently. And so what can happen when you're not in that REM state is that your cortisol, which is your main stress hormone, is higher. When you said you're like, I'm not a stressed person, like I'm naturally a very stressed and overwhelmed person. And so that was something that I had to work on a lot in order to bring all of my hormones back into balance. And I had to recognize that for me, I was stressing my body out in a variety of different ways. So the way that I like to look at it is mental, physical, emotional. So like for me, and I'll explain it for like how it might look for a client too. Like I was physically stressing my body out by working out for 2 hours a day. I know that sounds like a lot to some people. It was a lot. It was so overwhelming. Then I was working like 50, 60, sometimes 70 plus hour work weeks. And that was a mental stressor. And then I was restricting food, which was another physical stressor. So it's just like all of those things piled up to where for me, cortisol and your adrenals are the hormones that like, that's the function of your body that's meant to keep you alive, right? That's your fight or flight response. And so when those are constantly turned on, your body is going to forego anything else, any other functions, whether that's digestion or getting your period and ovulating or fertility, in order to keep you alive. So for me, my symptoms were, I lost my period. My thyroid slowed down majorly. I gained weight. My digestion was a mess. And it was all because my body was working so hard to pump out cortisol, to keep my fight or flight response turned on, to keep me alive. And so when you're in that chronic state of stress, you're going to naturally turn off other functions in your body, or you might skew them. So for a lot of my clients, like who are chronically stressed, they'll see their thyroid get out of whack. They may see too much estrogen and not enough progesterone, because cortisol, your stress hormone, and progesterone, the hormone that happens after you ovulate, those hormones fight for the same receptor sites. So they might have really bad PMS, like horrible irritability, really bad water retention, those types of things. So you see it show up, like we talk about bioindividuality. It's going to be the way that chronic stress shows up is going to be different for different people, but it is the foundation for all of these different imbalances to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and everything that you just described, I mean, that sounds stressful, like working that much and working out that much and everything. But in motherhood, you don't realize like the go, go, go. Like there's times where I'm like, I haven't eaten. I ate scraps off my daughter's plate. Like that was my like brunch. And then it's like, why do I feel like I'm about ready to like explode? I'm like, oh, I'm hangry right now.
My glucose is completely imbalanced. I had like a piece of a banana and a French fry for breakfast. Like, yeah, your blood sugar is totally off. It totally makes sense. And I think that, like you said, like you, as moms, we don't really get a break unless there's someone else there to support us. So that constant go, go, go. And what I talk to a lot of moms about, who I work with, like that sense of feeling rushed all the time, like that is another form of stress, just like not, not paying the bills, or, having a fight with your partner, like about something. Like they're all forms of stress. And so when we can recognize that there are all these different ways that we can feel cortisol flood into our body, we can do a much more effective job at managing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and you've talked too about kind of like mindset. You've kind of mentioned it here and there in the podcast. Where does that come into play? Because we know, like, we now know like the physical stresses, like obviously if I'm not getting enough sleep, if I'm not actually fueling my body with nutrition, if I'm not doing these other things, like, of course I'm stressed out. Of course my body is mad at me right now. But there's the mental aspect of it. So where does that kind of come into play? And what are maybe some things that we can do to help mentally?
So I think that as American women, it's definitely a cultural thing. There are so many expectations put on us to do it all, right? Whether that is to have your own business, take care of the kids, make sure you're there with cupcakes for, being room mom at soccer practice, and then coming home and cooking a dinner for your husband. And like, when does it ever end? When does it ever stop? And so I think that really making sure that you have a list of priorities based on your values. That's an exercise I like to do with clients all the time. It's like, what are your top 3 priorities right now based on your values? Because that's going to allow you to start to say no to a hell of a lot more things. And when you can say no, you start to create space in your day, and you start to have the capacity to shift out of that all or nothing mindset. Because when we have that all or nothing mindset, whether it's around a diet or around our to-do list, it can be exhausting. And it can feel like if we're not controlling everything, and if we're not in control of everything all the time, then we're fully out of control, and like it's a lost cause, and we just want to give up. And then all of the guilt and shame and all those other toxic emotions come into play. And so when we can release that all or nothing mindset by reframing things, by getting really in line with our own priorities and our own values, I think that a lot can change for any given woman. And for me, the work that I do with my clients, or even like share on Instagram, is that like, I want to see the mental shift happen before we even start implementing the physical changes. Because I think that when you come from a place of like, I'm open to reframing this, I'm open to doing less. My worth isn't completely dependent on how productive I am. When you come from that different mindset, you're so much more capable of implementing sleep strategies and a new diet and having the time to like make yourself some food, like all of these different things.
Yeah, I'm just taking some notes because I think that rings true for so many people that you said, just even my worth doesn't come from how productive I've been. I think that strikes a chord with so many people. Listen, I know it does with me because I was productive and life was so easy when I was single and had no kids and, was cooking, cleaning up for myself. And now it can be so hard. I was just saying the other day, I'm like, for some reason, putting away the laundry is like the hardest thing for me. Like I just actually put it away before like days worth of laundry before we hopped on this podcast, because I don't know why. It's just, it's sorting everything and putting it all away. And then I feel like it takes me forever for some reason to do it. But if I don't feel like I've had a quote unquote productive day, and by productive, I don't mean how much I got done for work. I don't mean, did I work out? Did I feed my children? It's like, what did I get done around the house? That's like, for me, my productive day. And if I didn't get that done, my worth is in that. I'm like, oh, well, I'm an awful wife and mom because I can see that this is dusty over there and I didn't get the vacuuming done and I didn't, buy groceries. So I don't know what I'm going to make for lunch. I don't know, just like different things like that. And then you let it build up and it's like, but then even if I talk to my husband, he's like, you're being ridiculous. Like, you know what I mean? He's like, you are nurturing 2 children. Like even if you stayed on the floor and just played with them all day and did nothing else, you did something. Like, it's not in that, but we wrap our worth in that. And I think that social media makes it worse when it comes to that thing.
Yes.
Cause I'm like, oh, look at their perfectly clean house over there. And I'm like, wait, maybe they have a house cleaner and I don't, or maybe they nobody's putting up pictures of when their house is a disaster.
Yes, 1,000%. I think that the other thing to remember in that conversation is that like, we are our own biggest critics, 1,000%. Like, we are the toughest on ourselves. And it's like, you're so blessed and lucky to have a partner who's like, they're lifting you up and being like, if you just play with the kids today, like, you are a rock star. Like, that's the kind of support system I feel like everybody truly needs. And the other thing is that I feel like we can do work on that inner critic and understand because typically the inner critic is always trying to protect us from something, like, you're not good enough, like, and like, okay, what happened like in your childhood or with your parents or with a teacher or whatever to like make you feel like there was this connection with having a clean house to your worth, to how like good you are. Like, that is a lot of work that I do with clients, because if we also can look at that inner critic from this standpoint of like, oh, you're trying to protect me from something that I experienced earlier on in life, to not have to feel that feeling again, then we can say, okay, if I am aware of that, I can have so much more compassion for myself in this moment. And I can just move on with my day rather than like staying stuck here. And you're 1,000% right. Social media makes it so much worse. And so if I have a client, like, I'll use a different example than a clean house. Like, let's say I have a client who's really struggling with their body image and feels really triggered every time they look at someone else on Instagram. It's like, you owe that person nothing. Like, unfollow. If someone is making you feel a certain way about yourself, like, unfollow. Like, even if it's me, like who someone's following, and I'm making them because there's something that's triggering. Like, the person who you're following that has the clean house or the body or whatever it is making you feel some sort of way about yourself. They might be the nicest person in the world, but they're making you feel a certain way. So value yourself enough to just say,
yeah. Well, I think it's so powerful though, that you kind of dove deep on the emotional side and the inner critic and talking about reframing. Like, that's really powerful. because a lot of times I guess you just kind of see, oh, this inner critic there is just like pointing the finger, but it's there, like you were saying, for a reason. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, you're protecting me from what?
Yep.
Okay, well, I no longer need this protection anymore. Like, so what's true of myself? Like, thank you so much for protecting me for that moment in my life.
Yep.
I don't need that protection anymore. And
And
so
it's
when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, like that's, I feel like I have these inner critics that I need to be like, okay, thank you. You did your job.
now I'll see you later. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think the same goes back to like, it goes back to like when I had an eating disorder. Like, it's like, okay, this girl, all she wants is acceptance. That is the only thing she wants. And she thinks that a thin body is going to get her that acceptance. Okay. But what will nourishing myself get me? Like, what will, like that, I'm not there anymore. So now that I've moved on and evolved, you can say goodbye to that inner critic and move on to the next piece of growth. It's there to help you to grow and to evolve and to change as a human, because that's what we're all here and meant to do anyways.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's crazy though, when you do look back and you think about the different things that maybe served you at different times in your life, because I do remember at one point thinking if I was skinny enough, I would find love. Like, and
Yes.
that's so crazy to
Crazy.
think. Like, I actually met my husband like on my healing journey, and I was at a weight way more than I was comfortable with myself. Like, it wasn't my quote unquote goal weight when I
Totally.
was in it, really bad. Um, and I feel like I was like 20 pounds heavier than I had been, like what I wanted in my mind to be, which now that I know myself just isn't even a realistic number. And I fell in love with him then. Like
Yeah.
and he loved me. Like, it wasn't
For
like,
you, it's
I'm
like,
like,
it's
wait,
so
you
much.
love me even though I'm not like, that I don't
Yes.
weigh less. Like, how ridiculous does that sound? But during that time, that's like legitimately, like, if I was a certain weight, my relationship would be perfect. If I was a certain weight, all the puzzle pieces in my life would fall together. And it's like, that makes no sense.
Yeah. It's like, we're still going to have issues. We're still going to have personal problems, no matter what weight we are, but you're 1,000% right. I was the same way. Like I said, like my thing, I think if like anyone who's doing this work, who's working on your inner critic for anything, whether it's your body or anything else, success, whatever it is, you can look at what that like deeper human desire is. And for me, it was acceptance. Like, you'll figure out what your word is. But it's funny, like I was like the same way, like longing so much for this acceptance. And it's like, I met my husband when I was 19, and he has accepted me at every single weight I've been at, 20 pounds heavier, than I am right now. Like, and it has nothing to do with that. And so I think that when we can start seeing the value in ourselves, like the people who love us most and love us unconditionally see that value, it's like we really can thrive when we can like actually get past the inner critic and see our own worth.
Yeah. How would you say, I guess, like, so we've now been talking about the emotional piece.
Yeah.
I guess I've heard a lot, but I guess I don't really know how it plays out. Like, when you're holding on to these different emotions, how that really can affect health and hormones and things like that. Like, you hear about people who even like were holding on to bitterness so much and like got cancer, like crazy things like that. So it's like, how does, like, for people listening, if they're like getting little triggers here and there, and they're like, okay, I know that I have this thing that maybe I'm holding on to, maybe that's affecting my peace, which will affect my hormones, which will affect my calm, which will, like, how does that kind of all play in together?
So two things. One, before I go into this. There's a really good book, if anyone out there hasn't read it, by Louise Hay, called You Can Heal Your Life. I'm sure you read it.
The podcast I listened to this morning mentioned it too. I feel like
Really?
and they talked about all or nothing, and then you said it. So I'm like, what is happening right now?
Yes. Signs from the Universe. Yes.
I know.
It's such a good book. And I read it when I was healing my eating disorder. And it is all about how certain emotions and thoughts can have an impact on your physical body. Same kind of concept in a different way is also talked about in Joe Dispenza's new book, Becoming Supernatural, which is also a really great read. But basically what happens is that your thoughts, they create feelings in your body. So you have this negative thought about yourself. I'm not good enough because of X, Y, or Z. It creates this vibration, a feeling, which is actually a feeling is a chemical reaction in your body, right? There's actual chemicals, hormones, things that are released when you have a feeling. So if you have a feeling that you're not good enough, or a thought that you're not good enough, and you start to feel shame about that, it is releasing negative inflammatory hormones into your system. And so from there, you are having this cycle of hormones that are released and inflammation that is created, and then ultimately chronic disease that can be created out of that. And so the other thing to remember too is that when those chemicals, those chemical messengers from the feelings are released, what is also happening is that you are making certain choices and habits based off of those chemical messengers. And so maybe you feel I'm not good enough, I feel shame, and then I'm going to use food as a way to cope with this feeling of shame. So that's like the habit that's forming out of this feeling of shame. And so you're going to sugar to comfort yourself every time you feel that feeling. And so that habit is also leading to more inflammation over time because you are using sugar chronically as a coping mechanism rather than actually just trying to work on shifting the thoughts. I think that so many of us aren't aware of the fact that we have the capacity to shift our thoughts. It's hard, it takes work, it takes effort, but we definitely are not our thoughts. We can shift them if we use tools on a consistent basis, like meditation, like breath work, like journaling, to become aware of them and then to be able to shift them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like so many people, like even myself, it's like I know the tools that I need to do, and then I just don't do them. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I know that I should do some breath work, that I should do some meditation, that I should journal. I used to love journaling, and it's basically been years since I've done it. But it's like so much easier just to like numb out on things, like even whether it's Netflix or whatever, social
Chocolate,
media, chocolate, whatever it is. It's like, it's so much easier. But if you actually want change, you have to do the work, and that's like where it's hard. Like you have to be willing to take steps. And that's like a question I've been asking myself lately too. It's like, okay, well, how bad do you want
yes, that's it.
to even
Feel
just
better.
for me, it's like managing my time. Like how bad do you want to get better with managing your time? And it's like, okay, well, not bad enough if you continue to waste it. Like if you
Yes.
continue to like just scroll a little bit longer when like I'm like, oh, I couldn't get these things done today, and it's like, how much screen time was on my phone today? Like how much like different things, like was I being productive for work, or was I just sitting there and like doing nothing? And
Yeah.
not that it's okay to like sit and do nothing sometimes, like that's totally fine, but that's like where I find myself wasting time with different things. And when it's like, okay, like now I'm completely overwhelmed. Now I don't know when I'm going to get everything done. Now I'm just feeling like everything's on top of me. But when I look at my day, it's like, it doesn't have to be this way.
1000%. I actually had a coach once tell me, because I was like making every excuse in the world to not use the tools that I knew were going to effectively help me. Like, again, I come from the same, like I told you, like stress, like chronic overwhelm, like that is my background. And so, she was like, the people who say that they have no time to meditate or to journal or to do the work are the people who need it the most. And I was like, whew, that is like such a big takeaway. And that, like, from that point on, I was like, okay, I need to make a commitment to myself to actually show up for this work, because when you work the work, it works. And that's what I ask clients all the time is exactly the question you said to me. It's like, you can be really honest with yourself, and like for me, it wasn't a priority for a long time to make change. Like, but how bad do you want to feel better? How bad do you want to feel less overwhelmed? How bad do you want to not be eating sugar every night? How bad do you want to move your body more? Like, it's all in terms of like how much it matters to you, because we all have the capacity to shift whatever we need to shift. We just need to make it more important than everything else. And so, like you said, like looking at, okay, how much was I on my phone today? Did I take the time on Sunday rather than watching a TV show to, prep some stuff for food for the week? Did I wash my vegetables? Did I organize my calendar? Like, all of those things are really good tools that we can all do. It just takes a little extra time and planning to do them. And I know for me too, like, I'm such a better version of myself, not just for me, but for my kids and for my husband, when I show up for those things. And like Friday, my son was sick and we didn't sleep at all. And so I was like coming up with every excuse in the book to not meditate and to just like be a couch potato all day long because I was so exhausted. And then I was super reactive with him and I was snappy. And I'm like, do I really want to be that person to my son? No. So I gave him to his dad for like 20 minutes and I went upstairs and meditated. And I completely shifted the rest of my day.
Yeah. And I think too, like something that's so important that also affects our health is quality time and connection with our loved ones. And when we are so overwhelmed, it's hard to do that. It's like my husband walks in the door and I'm like, okay, now I'm going to get all this stuff done that I didn't do all day long, and like not leave as soon as the kids are going to bed, then I'm finishing up things instead of like connecting. And he and I did this challenge, I want to say it was last year, which we're going to start again too, where we did no phones after 7 p.m. So like once we put the kids down, like then I'm like, all the books that I was saying, like, I don't have time to read this. I'm like, we sat and we read, we hung out on the couch, we talked, like, we just genuinely connected with each other. We spent like so much better time together. We played card games, which we love to do. Or if we decided to like watch something, we'd pick something together that we would watch. It wasn't just like him turning on sports and me sitting on my phone and then like whatever. It's like we decided to use that. And I'm like, whoa, I do have the time. So if I can do that, like with him at 7 p.m., like how could I implement that throughout the day? Like how much more would that affect my connection with my kids during the day if I'm not distracted? And all of that does so much affect our health.
It does, because I think that we don't really recognize that, like you said, like pleasure and connection are such valuable things. And I actually, one of my favorite hormone doctors, she was like talking on her blog that she has about, her name's Sarah Gottfried, about how there's been studies now that have actually shown that the more pleasure and connection that we have, we can actually boost our progesterone levels. Like, it has an impact on hormones. Like, it actually has an impact on physical health. And I think that, like, same thing with food. So many women will come to me and be like, oh, well, I feel like all this guilt and shame if I eat a brownie. And it's like, well, is it offering you connection with your kids? Is it offering you pleasure? Well, then it's offering you something. It's not completely invaluable. And so when we can see that pleasure and connection, we can add so much, like you said, to our own health span, and so much more joy and presence to our life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love for you, before we wrap up, just to kind of share, because I know you said that since you're a health coach, you can offer testing and do different things like that. What exactly do you offer? How can people find and connect to you? Where can they follow you? And if they're looking for somebody to work with, do you do it virtually?
Thank you for asking. Yes, I do it virtually. So everything is through Zoom. The way that I order labs is through a company called DHA Lab. So I can basically order anything. I order lab tests based on symptoms. So I'll get on a phone call with a person that I call a discovery call, and we'll talk about like what they're going through, what symptoms they have, what they want to achieve like over the course of 6 months. And then from there, I decide, okay, we need to look at your hormones. We need to look at your gut health. We need to look at your stress levels, whatever the case may be. And then we will book into a case review. I'll tell them everything I see in their labs, and then they can decide whether or not they want to work with me on the holistic solutions to solve whatever health issues there are over the course of 6 months. And I do have women who are like also, you know, on hormone replacement therapy, but also want to eventually get off of it or want to improve their health with lifestyle just as much as their, you know, hormones that they're getting from their doctor are. So it's a variety of different women, a variety of different ages. And I coach women one-on-one for 6 months. I also have an online course that if you, you know, want to have me order your labs and just like kind of do it on your own time, that is also available. And then a membership platform where I teach Pilates and offer recipes and guided meditations. And you can find all of that at wellnessbykelley.com and follow me on Instagram at wellnessbykelley.
Awesome.
Kelley,
And I will have, yes.
Yeah.
I will have all of that in the show notes. So it's really easy for people listening just to scroll down and be able to connect with you. I just want to thank you so much for your time and your energy today and your expertise. I love chatting with you. I feel like we could talk about a lot of things for a lot of time.
And that's why you have to come on our podcast so we can
Yes.
talk more about you and doula life and mom life, because we would love to hear all about that.
Yeah, and I would absolutely love to. So everybody listening, look out for that. Also, yes, she does have a podcast. Do you want to tell everybody the name so they know where they can listen to you at?
Yes, we actually are launching season 2 starting in mid-September. And our podcast is called Balancing Chaos. It's my husband and I.
Balancing Chaos sounds like such a fitting title for
yes,
for life.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for coming on.
Thank you. I'm so excited. Thank you so much.